AI is the biggest cheating tool in education, because if schools and educators are not making sure that students are learning how to develop the skills to compete with AI, they're cheating students out of their future,
Right.
because this is how the world is going to be run.
Hey everyone, as you know, my name is Kyle Wallgren, and yes, this is another episode of the Business of Education where I get to talk to people that can answer questions that I'm interested in learning about. Being a new startup founder in the edtech space, I love to talk to people that have been there, done that, and today our guest has done that. Ross Romano is the CEO of September Strategies, a firm that helps organizations and high-performing leaders in the K-12 education industry enhance their strategic decision-making, brand messaging, and overall impact. Ross, thank you for coming on the show.
Kyle, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
I appreciate it. Ross, we've talked a little bit in the past, early on in Ed Soma's career. You knew about us before anybody else did, so thank you for staying engaged. But what inspired you to start September Strategies and dive into the ed tech markets with all of the different markets out there to focus on?
Yeah, so there were a few things. I'd been in the education world for a number of years already in a variety of roles, and most recently was running a marketing and PR agency. But um, wanted to start this new firm. Number one, I mean, it's driven by what motivates my work in education overall, right? Which is really promoting innovative solutions to address equity. And what are all the areas out there where we could be doing better in schools, could be doing better for students in general, for educators, for society, and how do we really help those solutions to have success? So that's kind of the foundation. And then a couple of things unique to what I wanted to be able to do with this firm. One was to be able to go deeper with founders and CEOs in really addressing their well-rounded needs, and not being just on the periphery doing communications or marketing or some isolated role, but really helping them work through problem solving, the overall vision, the strategy, connecting all of those dots to develop an approach that works. And one of the things that led to that was I had seen from internal roles early in my career doing corporate communications, to the agency side, working with a variety of different departments in companies, the disconnect that can happen across organizations, and not even necessarily huge ones, where the sales team is out in the field, right, trying to get the solution into schools, and they have no idea what's happening in other areas of the company. Nobody's really keeping them up to date, and so they're on their own. Or for organizations that do a variety of things, maybe they do legislative advocacy, maybe they do other mission oriented work in addition to products and services, where maybe the marketing department only pays attention to what they believe is the quote unquote revenue generating aspects, the products, without understanding, like in education, the value proposition is that you do all of those things, right? It's the fact that you stand for something, that you have a purpose to it. It's not just the isolated features of a product, but it's why you do it and how it connects to that overall foundation. And so being able to really help companies connect those dots, eliminate those communication gaps, right? Or those things that affect sales enablement capabilities and just their overall ability to fulfill what their mission is. Because those founders, like like yourself, right, you're in it for really great reasons. You want to make a difference, but it's all those little things, right, that can go wrong, that prevent you from being able to do that. So that's what I really wanted to help with.
No, that makes so much sense. It's one of the things that I think I'm going through in real time. I have we use lots of very high talented advisors to come in and for short periods of and kind of overlook everything and point out some of our weaknesses. And the last one that we had in pointed out cross-platform communication was one of our biggest weaknesses. So we're actively doing some of the things that you touched on, but another thing that you had mentioned from the overall brand and marketing message, I think is like sometimes very hard to understand, especially in the ed tech space, especially for us, because the question that we get asked, or even you ask yourself internally, is who do we serve, right? And when you're trying to tell that message to a, to the person that you're marketing to, especially in a company like ours, where we're a reading platform, you need to have kids reading on the platform in order to generate data for that data to be valuable to the teachers. And then you need administration to think that data is important enough for the teachers to buy it. So in that, sales loop, it's hard to identify who to speak to from a marketing standpoint.
Right.
With this show being directed at young ed tech founders, what's some advice that you could give on how to identify that message, and what are the biggest mistakes you see early ed tech founders make when trying to tell that message?
Yeah. Yeah, that is one that can go awry, right? And the most common thing that I see when it's not, there's two things that are most common when it's not going well. One is there's a tendency for a lot of companies entering the ed tech space to gear all of their messaging toward teachers, and particularly if teachers are the product users, right? Um, and it's important to be able to communicate to the teachers, but if they are not the purchasers, or if they're not the only audience, there's something missed in that. And then another piece that goes wrong is the failure, I think, to put oneself in the shoes of the audiences, and too much of a focus on talking about what we do, right? And getting into all the product features or how smart we are for this tool we created, and forgetting to think about what they care about is how it works for them, how it helps them solve their challenges. So there's a few things that I recommend. One is I always break down the audiences into kind of three buckets: purchaser, end user, influencer. Right? And there's some overlap. Some groups may be in multiple buckets, but and a lot of times in the school market, right, the purchasers are at least at the school level, if not the district level. Those might not be the people who are using the tool if it's a classroom focused thing, but they're the ones who are making the decision whether or not to purchase it. So what do they need to know? What are their pain points? I always start with the pain points. What problems are they trying to solve? How do we solve them? And then you have your end users. That might be the teachers. That might include students in a lot of cases. And what are the pain points that they have? What are the things they want to solve? And how do we tell them about that? And then you also have your influencers, which teachers certainly can be influencers, right, toward their school leadership and the tools to buy. Parents can be influencers, school boards. There's a lot of other stakeholders around who have goals that they want for student success. Again, they're not the ones who can make the decision about what we're purchasing, but they can advocate for it if they understand there's a solution out there that's going to help our children achieve the outcomes that we want them to achieve. We're aware that it exists. Now we can go advocate for it. So thinking about it in that lens, and then putting yourself in their shoes of what are they challenged by? What are they frustrated by? What do they want to see? And what are we doing about it? I think addresses it a lot more comprehensively, and eliminates that issue of, okay, we're really only talking to one segment of the audience and it's potentially not the right one. Or even in the other case, vice versa, the same thing can happen if the purchaser is administration and the users are teachers, and you're only talking to administration, right?
Right.
Because then what you might end up happening is administration purchases a tool, they want to implement it, teachers aren't aware of it, they're not on board, they're not really excited about it because they haven't been engaged, and now the implementation fails in that regard as well, because so that's why you need to engage everybody.
One of the things that I've been super blessed because of the podcast, I've got to have all kinds of great voices on the show or talk to me, do mentoring classes. One of the people that I had a conversation with early on was one of the first people that led marketing for Duolingo. And one of the things that she pointed out was looking at our social media, and she's like, well, who are you marketing to? And I feel like that's been the biggest thing. Like, you think about social media and you think about the story that you want to tell or the audience that you want to talk to. I think sometimes we overlook the ability to communicate with a department through social media. We're always trying to talk to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's something that's been super challenging for us, especially at Soma, trying to make sure that we're telling that story. Branding's another thing, though, right? One thing is marketing. Branding's a whole other conversation. What's some advice early on that you would give a young founder to focus on branding? We've been fortunate enough. We've got Shaquille O'Neal on our team,
Mm-hmm.
and he comes with maybe one of the biggest brands
Yeah.
in the world. So we get feedback all the time on branding, but um, give it to our audience, something that they sometimes is overlooked when building a brand.
Simplicity
I like
is
that.
probably number one, right? Because all of these tools are so multifaceted, impressive as far as what they can do, what went into them, and as the person on the inside, um, you can see all of that, right? And you're excited about all of it. You want to talk about everything, and ultimately, it becomes a hard message for somebody to wrap their head around because, well, what is this tool? It does all these things. And so I think the easiest way to get to that is to lead with the mission and say, okay, what is our mission statement here? What are we, setting out to do? What is the number one problem we're meant to solve? And how do we make that indelible to people? So it's thinking about, what are maybe the top 3 points that are memorable that people can have in their mind when they think about us. What are the top two maybe challenges that we're solving? Is there maybe one major data point that we can lead with, or is there a success story that we can go forward with? But kind of, it's like fighting that urge to try to be everything to everybody, or trying to do too much at once. Once you capture somebody's attention and you have them in conversation, then you can get into more detail, of course, about their needs. If you're dealing with a school audience, of course, there's certain requirements, compliance requirements, and things of that nature. But you have to sort of think about that as more down the road. But what's the thing that makes them want to have the conversation in the first place? And this also, one other thing I would bring forth is try to eliminate the jargon. Right? Put it in terms that people understand, that they will immediately say, "Oh yeah, that's that's something I need,"
Mhm.
and now let me learn more about it. But yeah, I think the most effective brands capture people's attention, and then people remember that part of it. And you can think about that in consumer or otherwise, right? That there's so many things that all these companies do. A great example is Amazon, right? I mean, how many different things does that company do?
Oh yeah.
And does their typical customer know about 90% of them, right? Even just having an Amazon Prime membership. Do you know about most of the benefits that you technically have? Not really. But they don't worry about that. That's information that's available to you when you're ready to access it. But you're knowing about them from, connecting you the world A to Z and convenience. And okay, now I know what Amazon is. Now I'm hooked.
I was actually thinking about that yesterday. What would Amazon classify themselves today? What type of business would they be? Was literally something that I was thinking about as I saw 35 Amazon trucks driving down the road. Are
Right.
they a courier service? Are they an online retail store? Are they a data center? Are they a warehousing center? You know, what is Amazon? It's very interesting, and you're right. They do 100 things. Um, you created and launched the Excellence in Equity Award in partnerships with the American Consortium for Equity in Education. Talk to us a little bit about that. Equity in education is super important. Uh, let's bring
Yeah.
some light on that.
Yeah, we've been doing the awards for 2 years now. The consortium's been around a little longer, doing magazine, podcast, a variety of things. But now we're entering our third year of the awards, and a couple of the motivators there were, one, as I referenced earlier, I'm all in it for the equity. But the more you work with different companies, different individuals, you realize most people have one narrow definition that comes to mind when they think about equity, right? They're either thinking about race and ethnicity, about socioeconomics, about special education services, about language learners, etc. And the answer is it's all of these things and more. It is what are all of the elements that will help every student have the opportunities to achieve the outcomes that they're capable of, right? And so I really felt it was critical to bring that all together in a way that allowed each of those categories to uniquely stand on its own, but all within one program. So that it wouldn't just be saying, okay, there's an equity umbrella and everything fits under it,
Mm-hmm.
because that kind of feeds into one of the issues where the word just becomes a cliche,
Right.
right? And every company throws equity up on their website and they stop even thinking about what it means. They just know, well, we have to say this because it's important. But also to not just have them be isolated where, okay, this person, when they say equity, they mean this or they mean. So that was one thing. And the other thing that I felt was so important is that we have to fight back against this perception that's often felt, I think, particularly in schools, often among educators, that industry and schools, or industry and educators, are somehow like in opposition, right? Like we're on the same team. We all are here in this industry, whatever our role is, whether we're an ed tech founder, whether we are a teacher, an administrator, whether we work in a variety of roles, whether it's salesperson, especially, right? Because those are the people that usually I feel like get the brunt of it. That we're in this because we want to help educators and students succeed, and it's all aligned around the same mission. So I felt it was critical to have a program that was addressing both industry and educators all together, and a lot of those underrepresented. We have categories and educators not only for district leaders, school leaders, tech leaders, teachers, gen ed, special ed, but for paraprofessionals, for librarians, for sports coaches, for mental health professionals, right? All of these people are really critical to making sure that every student is cared for, every student has a great experience in school, has great outcomes, just as much as having a great curriculum, having a great pedagogy. It all matters. And I think a lot of those folks get overlooked for the difference they can make. So yeah, over the 2 years, we've had 120 winners, many more honorable mentions and nominees, and then we follow through with the program, not just in naming them, but then actually platforming them and highlighting them, having them on podcasts. We did a PR blitz, reaching out to their local newspapers to let them know, hey, these people in your community won these awards for doing this great work that they do. And that's all just part of the process. Like they don't have to do anything except submit their information, right? But it's because it's about how can they inspire others to do similar things. That's actually one of the things we ask in the nominations, and or we ask when the judges review them, is what's the potential of this to inspire others. um that this person is doing great work, but if we get them out there and talk about what they're doing, is somebody else going to say, I want to do that too? and
I love
and
that.
we want to scale this thing, right? So it's critical.
I like that. You touched on a couple things that I think are super important. And we saw last year in the media things get, that had the best of intentions get misbranded and put in the wrong buckets, that people really wanted to try and do something good with. And it ended up blowing up in their face. But with equity, without it becoming just a trend word, how do you think AI is going to help with equity within the school system? I've heard a lot about, where people believe it can make an impact there. But I also have some concerns with how biased some of the AI is being trained. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, AI is the next. It's here. It's not really new in a lot of ways. Some of the capabilities of it have advanced to the point where it feels new, right? But of
Mhm.
course, it's a part of so many technologies. But one thing that I've been saying about AI, as a play on particularly with tools like ChatGPT, generative AI that can create content, and there's been a lot of focus in the early going in schools on AI detection and plagiarism and things like that, which I think is the completely wrong question to be asking. Because if a student can complete an assignment completely by just plugging it into an AI tool, then it's not a good assignment, because
Right.
it means that they're not really developing skills for the future. But what I say about it is, AI, yeah, AI is the biggest cheating tool in education, because if schools and educators are not making sure that students are learning how to develop the skills to compete with AI, they're cheating students out of their future,
Right.
because this is how the world is going to be run. And there's so many of these tools, and I've talked to founders who I've basically begged them to let me advise them, because I can tell they don't really know what they're trying to do with the tool, right? This technology seems impressive, but who's it for? Or
Right.
what's it supposed to do? And then there's others that are doing remarkable things. And AI, when it comes back to that equity piece, it really can be just as a, with the variety of tools that are out there, it can be the thing that closes gaps that have been really stubborn, that we haven't been able to solve through other means, because it can enhance the ability to personalize and differentiate, right, to adapt to a variety of different students' backgrounds and languages, and think about all those things you can do. Or it can be the thing that, if it's not, and particularly if it's not really embraced in the schooling environment, that can widen those gaps to the point where they maybe can't be closed, because students who have access, and who have more means and more privilege, they're going to get access to the tools, they're going to learn how to use them outside of school, they're going to develop the skills, and they're going to learn how to go out and do great things in the new economy, right? Students who may not have that same kind of access outside of school, or who may not have somebody at home who can teach them how to use it, right, if they're not
Hmm.
learning how to do it in school, they're going to fall behind. And I mean, so in the next year, it's kind of a critical time to decide, what do we want to do, what do we want outcomes to be here, and let's not operate from a place of fear, oh, what if they use it to
Oh
cheat,
yeah.
and let's operate from, what if they use it to create something that we've never even imagined.
No, I like that. The critical thinking aspect, I think, is where teachers are never going to be replaced. I don't think that AI is going to go in and be able to teach critical thinking skills like a human component can do that. I don't see it. Not yet, anyways. But uh, my biggest thing is that AI isn't going to replace teachers. It's just going to allow them to focus on the things that they can do better
Right.
more. And once you get that information into those teachers' hands and lower the fear aspect of AI taking over their job, then they'll really be able to adopt those tools. You had mentioned that AI can help build a more individual learning process, and that's what we've focused on with EdSoma, is making sure that we can identify each layer of what that child needs, tied with content that's engaging to them, and then make suggestions based off of something that would be only for that individual student to help them grow. Um, so we believe that that same value in building a more customized learning path through AI is going to be the direction that we'd like to see it go, and that's how we're using it. So thank you for pointing that out. One of the other things you do is performance coaching, and you do that in the edtech space. What are some things that you do to identify somebody that's going to be a high performer early on, that you could help give advice on to maybe edtech founders when looking for somebody to onboard into their company, or a co-founder that they're looking for? Because not everybody has it in them to perform at those high peaks all the time. And I feel
Yeah.
like, especially in ed tech, because it can beat you down, you need to be a high performer if you're really going to last in this space.
Yeah. I would say openness to insights is one of the biggest things, right? It's that In the case of in the business environment, who are the people that want to surround themselves with people that are quote unquote smarter than them, or who know things they don't know, who are going to push them, right? And because
Mhm.
they know they want to keep learning and keep getting better, and they have the humility to say, I'm okay. Like I'm the founder, right? I'm secure in my role. I have that confidence. It doesn't threaten me to be pushed, to be around people. And then, because in the coaching environment, that's really a lot of what it is when somebody enters, are they truly open to what they learn? Are they looking to learn more about themselves, to come up with some insights that will allow them to make and then commit to decisions for the ways in which they want to improve and then follow through with it? Or are they more closed off, shielding themselves? Are they thinking that they can improve because you know they're already perfect, or all of those things? Because I mean, particularly when you're working in this field, but any field, right? It's constantly changing. Nobody
Right.
knows everything. Nobody knows everything they need to know today to be successful for the next 5 or 10 years. And and I think the people a lot of times that on the from the outside appear like, wow, they're the most self-motivated, they're they're the most productive, they just know how to get things done. I think behind the scenes, those are people who are relying on others to help them keep learning and getting better, right? That's the stuff you don't see, but
Yeah.
that's the stuff that allows them to keep moving forward, is they're constantly clarifying their insights and their priorities and where they spend their time, and all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's openness, it's humility, and it's that self-identification of, I want to keep improving because that's what it means to be a high performer.
I had to start smiling when you were talking about that because I get asked that question, how do you have enough time in your day to do all the things that you do? Um, and I believe it or not, not believe it or not, you believe it, but what you said is how I get things done. I really trust in the people I surround myself with to make decisions on their own, and to be able to lead their departments properly. But I spend probably just as much time learning as I do executing, maybe, very equal. I'm thinking about it right now, but I probably have 5 different people that I leverage on weekly calls for high performance coaching. People that have either, built $1 billion business, or they have talked to an audience that I'm trying to learn how to talk to, or, how to build a data room. I have a call with a guy by the name of T all the time on how I can be more organized, so when we're trying to raise money, it's not such a big lift every time. So that's really, really good information that you just gave out. My biggest compliment that I've ever got in my life was, and I've actually got it twice, that I was one of the most coachable people they've ever worked with. And these come from like high performing CEOs. One was the former CEO of FedEx, and one was the founder of um, Travelocity, or not, uh, Priceline, sorry, and bookings.com, Jeff Hoffman. Um, but that was probably the best compliment I've ever had outside of being a parent, but from a work thing, is somebody saying that you're very coachable. That was a
Yeah.
huge compliment for me. One of the things that I focus on, or like to end the podcast with, is networking tips and how important it is. I reached out to you actually.
Mhm.
The way we first connected was through advising.
Yeah.
I'd signed up for some advising, to find an advisor for our company aboard. I can't even remember the name of the platform, but that's how we originally met. But networking, that's what that was there for. That's what I utilized that for. Here we are, a couple, maybe 3 years later, having a conversation about education on a podcast. But how important is your network to you? And what's some advice to a new founder on how to leverage their network to build their
Yeah. Network is pretty much everything, right? When going back to when you want to be a high performer, when you want to, uh, especially when you want to be able to create new opportunities that haven't been created before. Um, you have to have a network of people that know you, that are invested in you. And so, one of the things particularly for future founders, is network, even and perhaps especially when you feel like you don't have to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Work on building relationships and cultivating that network when you don't need anything from anybody, when you can just focus on relationship, when you can focus on service, when you can see what can I do for other people. um, kind of build that strength there, and then eventually you'll be in a position where somebody can help you with something, and so on. But I think, people who are ineffective networkers, think of it as purely transactional, or they only start thinking about it when they need something. And at that point, there's not really going to be a lot of equity coming back your way to say, okay, I haven't even heard from this person in how long, or they're just trying to start to get to know me and they're immediately asking me for something, right? Um, so that's a big thing. And yeah, for founders out there who already have their companies and things, one of the things I learned early on when I was doing a PR work, and I carried it into other areas of work, is never never think of anything as a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
Always think of it as at least a potential relationship, right? Because what would happen back then, and what most people would typically do, is you get an inquiry from a reporter who says, I am working on this story and can I talk to somebody? And then you fulfill the inquiry and you move on, right? And not thinking, well, what else might I be able to help this person with, or what might they be working on next, and all of that, and that, can we develop a relationship? It doesn't mean there's anything immediately right now, but we get to know each other, and then we're collaborating down the road. I've had situations like that where several years later ended up doing some kind of partnership with somebody that initially came up from something like that. So the same thing for any other piece. You're on a podcast, right? Or you meet somebody at a conference, and you have a meeting that's about one thing. Just think about, let's just keep this relationship going. There doesn't have to be an immediate call to action to everything. It's about relationships, learning what people are doing, finding opportunities to serve when I can, to support others, and then trusting that when the time comes, you will have a network of people who are ready to support you.
No, that makes sense. I actually just there was a bunch of stuff you were saying that like reminded me of so many things that I've learned over the last few years. Dave Meltzer, in case anybody doesn't know about him, puts on these amazing networking events. They're a pay to play type event, but maybe the most beneficial ones I've ever gone to. I've met some of my best friends today at those events just because everybody in that room had the same challenges. And it was nice to be able to lean on people that were going through the same things. And now these people have become my long term friends. But also a guy by the name of Carl Grant, who was the first person I started talking to about learning how to raise money, just had a post on his TikTok the other day. And he said that for every minute that he spends networking, he puts a minute in following up with the people he
Mm-hmm.
met, just to learn more about them. And that's how he's built his network. And now he helps raise money for startups. And I think his LinkedIn has over 30 or 40,000 followers of people that he knows and can call on
Right.
in there. It's one thing to have them on your LinkedIn account, but will they answer a message when you have a
Yeah.
question? That's the
Follow
truth.
up. And there's one of the huge opportunities. I mean, I'm sure this is not new, but I've noticed it more and more. Yeah, be available,
Mm-hmm.
be responsive, and you just that simple thing creates an advantage, because so many people out there just ghost people, right? They're not responsive, they go missing. You being the one who gets back to somebody could get you an opportunity that you never would have thought you would have gotten just by replying, and and being somebody that they know, hey, if I reach out to this person, they'll get back to me, because we've established that, and that's a huge thing in any kind of business, because the people, right? People
Mhm.
that if you send them an email, you'll have to follow up a few times, and you probably won't hear back, or you text them, and the people, oh, if I reach out to them, I'll hear back from them quickly, and so let me go to them because I need to move this thing along fast. And so be the person on the other end.
And some of those people that you're pointing out there are like the most non-expected. So the people that blow you off, or that have blown me off, I find to be like the more of the underperforming type people.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that get back to me all the time within, a realistic turnaround are the people that have overperformed their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see a difference in the quality of person by how fast or if they respond at all. I've learned that a lot, and it kind of tells me right away if I'm interested in working with somebody of
Yeah.
that nature or not. Is how quick or how often they respond. And I try. I'm not the best at it. I work on it every day, but because of my partnership with Shaquille, who I met through a LinkedIn message, I just remind myself every day that I wouldn't be here if somebody else didn't respond on their end to my request early on. So I try and make sure to do that. And that's ultimately why I put this podcast together, was to help bring people together and to more answers and have access to people they might not necessarily have. Ross, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if they were looking for some coaching, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest, is, I mean, you can either go to my website, septemberstrat.com, and just fill out the contact form, or just email me directly, ross@septemberstrat.com, or connect on LinkedIn, Ross Romano, or Twitter, Ross B. Romano. But LinkedIn's a really easy way to get a hold of me, and you don't have to worry about finding an email address, or email me, and I will respond to you. I'll walk the walk of what I just said.
I love LinkedIn. It's my favorite resource. Sometimes there's a lot of spam, but sometimes there's a lot of good opportunities. So thank you, Ross. I appreciate you being on the show. We will put Ross's information in the below the podcast episode. So if anybody wants to reach out, but Ross, thank you for coming on the show, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me on.
Talk soon.